Hi, I'm Jennifer Lee, Admin Evangelist, and this is How I Solved It. Ever build a complex flow and get that flow error email and find it difficult to figure out where your flow went wrong? Well, Sarah Pilzer ran into the same issue when troubleshooting her magnificent registration screen flow. Let's see how she solved it using a naming convention, assignment flow elements, and a customized flow email. Today, I'm with Sarah Pilzer, Director of Operations at CDSS, a Golden Hoodie recipient, hashtag Life with Goldie, and a returning guest. Welcome back to How I Solved It, Sarah.
Thanks, Jen. Glad to be here.
So I always love hearing about each person's Salesforce journey because they're all unique. So Sarah, how did you come into the Salesforce world?
Well, believe it or not, I started actually as a scientist. I'm a biologist by training, but I was hired by my nonprofit to come in and do data analysis for the organization, taking those science skills and applying them to nonprofit management. And when I joined the company, we were using a legacy database that didn't even connect to the internet. It was totally siloed. Um, and after a few years there, um, we were heading into our centennial anniversary. And part of that project was to update our technology. And I wasn't yet part of that decision-making team, but during the research into other systems, they came across Salesforce. And of course, the Power of Us program, which allows nonprofits to get started with Salesforce with 10 free licenses, was really attractive to our leadership. And so they decided, yes, we're going to go with Salesforce. And very soon after that, they were like, who on staff does data? Well, Sarah, how about you? Why don't you take on this project of transferring all of our data from the old system into Salesforce? And that's when I first found out about Salesforce. I'd never heard of it before, which is a kind of a fairly common story, I think, especially among nonprofit admins, that they discover it on the job. And then I, from there, dove in and started learning everything I could about it. Thankfully, that was right when Trailhead was really taking off. So I was very fortunate to be able to learn via Trailhead. I took a couple of courses, in-person courses too. But that was right around the end of 2016, and then the early spring of 2017. I had the very good fortune of my company is based in Western Massachusetts. And so it wasn't too far for me to travel to Boston for the World Tour stop that was happening. And that was my first Salesforce event where I walked into Heinz Convention Center, not really knowing what to expect, and was just totally overwhelmed by this amazing community that I was walking into. And I learned so much during that time. And I remember especially going to Mike and Jillian were there, and they were doing their essential habits for new admins session. And I made sure to bookmark that. And I went to that, and I was just so jazzed up and excited from there that I was like, oh, I can't wait to take all of this learning back to my organization and really get us going with Salesforce.
And you know that we've taken the Essential Habits material and recently converted that to a Trailhead module.
There you go. Yeah, that's awesome.
And so that's great you went to the Boston World Tour because Boston is my hometown. Love it. And you and I were probably just wandering around, and eventually our paths connected years later. So
yeah,
I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
I know you're pretty active in the community. You've presented at community events and for platform hours. So how did you get involved in the community? What advice do you have for others who want to get involved in presenting and doing things like that?
Yeah, well, I think it was at that World Tour event that the Trailblazer community, which was then called the Success Forums or Success Community, I think, was just making that transition into like being the central place for trailblazers to go to connect with each other. And so I think they had a station in the expo hall where I went, and I was like, oh, what's this all about? And they told me, and I found out there was a local Trailblazer community group, a admins user group in my area. So I started going to those meetings. And I think it might have been the following fall when I went to Dreamforce for the first time, and I realized everybody was on Twitter. So I opened a Twitter account. I had never used Twitter before. I wasn't really familiar with it. I was like, I didn't really understand it, but I was just so excited about everything I was learning that I wanted a place to share that. And Twitter was a great place where I could like snap a selfie with Astro and put it on Twitter. And all of a sudden there's all these people connecting with me being like, hey, you're welcome to the community. And I started making real friends that way, and connecting with folks who were also either just starting out with Salesforce or folks who knew more. I think I remember reading your blog when I was starting learning about Flow, and that was like a huge inspiration to me. So it was really cool when we got to meet later on. And it was also right around the time when Lightning was really taking off. And my organization was also fortunate in that I think the first couple months we were working with a implementation partner, and we'd started in Classic, but after going to some of these Salesforce events, I was like, oh, before we really get going, I'm going to switch us over to Lightning right away. So we were pretty much Lightning first. And that also led to me joining the Lightning Champions program, which was a program that encouraged customers who were using Lightning to partner with Salesforce Lightning team members to really promote it and help people make that leap from Classic to Lightning. And that's another place that I met a lot of people and made friends with them. So you might be able to tell that I'm an extrovert. I like making new friends, so it's kind of easy for me to just go up to people and be like, "Hey, I'm Sarah. I'm interested in this. I've read your blog or whatever." So I know it can be a little bit harder for folks who don't have that outgoing by nature, but I think finding your avenue to connect. It doesn't have to be all the places. It's just either it's Twitter or it's the community or it's your local user group. There's lots and lots of options of ways to get involved.
Great. And what words of advice do you have for new admins starting in the nonprofit space?
Well, as I'm sure you know, in nonprofit world, we wear many hats. Most times an employee isn't doing just one job. So you're an admin and maybe you're also working on the development team, or you're an admin and you also manage programs. And so I think one of the key things that you can do as an admin is find the areas where different roles overlap and build towards that. So if you can build a Lightning page layout that works for more than one department, that's going to be more efficient. It's going to save you time. You can maintain just one Lightning page layout as opposed to multiple for different departments. At the same time, you definitely want to use the flexibility of Salesforce to be able to customize things to make your users' jobs more efficient and better. So like if you can create a little screen flow that works for data entry for fundraisers, go ahead and do that, and then put that on the opportunity page right there. Put it at their fingertips. So think about, talk to your users, find out what tools they need to make their jobs better, and then deliver them to them.
Great advice. All right. So tell me about the business problem you're trying to solve.
Well, one of the programs that we run we have summer camp programs for music and dance. They're for adults and families. And every year we have about 2,000 to 3,000 people registering for these camps. And so we have an Experience Cloud site that allows them to log in, and I've built a flow that steps them through the process of registration. And I started building this, and it became very complex because as people are walking through registration, they can decide to add people to their registration, take people off. They can say, oh, I want to go to this program. No, I want to go to that program. There's a lot of decision point opportunities for like branching. And so I was creating this flow, and it just got a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger. And so I needed a way to be able to find where I was in the flow, figure out what pieces were happening when. And when I started debugging, I wanted a way to like really quickly hone in on what had gone wrong. And I noticed that was getting more difficult the larger the flow got.
Mm-hmm.
One other side piece to that is because of all these decision points, a lot of times I would want to use sort of a simpler label for the decision point, like did they click yes, or did they click continue, yes or no. But that happens several times throughout the flow, and I was running into the problem of every decision element needs to have a unique name. And I was repeating these names over and over. So I needed to come up with a way that I could create unique names for each of those decisions.
Yeah, because you're like, which yes is it?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So I'm interested in seeing how you solved it.
Great. Well, let's dive into that flow. I'll share my screen. All right, here is the flow. And if we zoom out a little bit, you can see that it is really quite complex. There's a lot going on in this screen. So as I was talking about, the different decision points will sometimes have the same answers. So for example, here is a decision point where we have go back, continue. And if we look at this one over here, we also have continue, go back. They're the same labels. But I wanted to differentiate between them. So you'll notice that each of my elements has a code in the front of it. For example, here we have D03. That is decision 3. So this is the third decision in the flow. And if by we tacking that code on to the beginning of the API name for the decision outcome, we can use the same label, but have a different name on the back end. And that allows us to reuse those names. So that's one thing that I did to solve that issue of wanting to have similar decision points throughout the flow. Now, in a complex flow like this, things can go wrong and do go wrong. And when that happens, you might be familiar with the error emails that flow sends, which can be quite overwhelming. So if we take a look at this error message here, something went wrong. I can see kind of what it was, but if I want to find out where it happened, I'm going to have to scroll down through all of this information that's coming in from the flow. It's all the way down here at the bottom where you might be able to feel like, okay, where was the last place that the flow was executing before this error happened? But it's a lot to sift through. So I thought, is there a way that I can start to use this naming convention? Because I know based on the name where things are in the flow, the lower numbers happen earlier in the flow, the higher numbers happen later in the flow. Maybe I can put that into a customized email that'll tell me exactly what went wrong. And so that's what I did. And if you take a look at that email, and let's look at them side by side, you can see that this email has all the pertinent information laid out for me simply and in a way that is very easy to parse, as opposed to trying to sort through figuring out who was the user that ran this, where did things go wrong. So this version of the email provides information about who was running the flow when it errored out. And then in here, this is really the key piece. These are error elements that I'm assigning in the flow. And here we can see that's that same naming convention, CO4. So I know this was at the 4th create element in the flow. And I've assigned it a number, so I know a little bit more about what's going on here. And then there's this error variable value, which if I go back to the flow, let's take a look at that C4. So when I'm going back to troubleshoot, if you click on the element manager, you can type in the element name that it was gotten, or that was provided by the email, And if you use the search function, it'll take you right to that spot in the flow. So you don't even have to pan around looking for it. You can go right there. And if we look at this, we'll see it's a create element. And I have this fault message. So if an error happens, it's going to go to this assignment. And what's happening in the assignment is it's assigning the error number based off of whatever I've decided to put in it. And this error element, which again, I'm assigning this, I know where it's happening in the flow. So I put in the most recent naming convention for that element. So I know where it happened. And in some cases, you might want to assign a variable value to that tells you what were the state of the variables before the error happened. So, for example, in this error, we're going to say, okay, what variable are we concerned about in this particular case? It's we're in a loop, so I'm concerned about what iteration is going through the loop. So I'm going to take my variable name, and this is just a text piece to say this is the variable name, and then I'm going to assign another part that is the value of that variable. And these are both going into another separate variable that I've created, which is a text variable. So we're saying put in the name of the variable and then put in the value of the variable. And we can then report on that in the email. In this particular example, there isn't actually a variable to look at. But for example, if we were looking at a different email, we might see, oh, that's an unexpected variable value. That might be why the error occurred. So the best part about this is it's entirely customizable. Once I've assigned those variables based off of where we are in the flow, you can add them to a text template that you can use for your email that you're going to send. And in this case, I've included some global variables about the user that you can get via flow. These are those custom variables that I'm putting in the error element and the error number and the values for the variable error variables. And then again, other global data about what time it happened. Here's where you can add that standard fault message if something goes wrong, so you can get additional information from Flow about what happened. And here's just some custom information about what record triggered this error. So you can put in this can be completely customized based on your use case. I've happened to put in some information about the registration and who the contact was and the opportunity associated with the registration. But that's all very particular to my use case. And if you were going to use this, you could customize it to have any information that's going to help you as an admin solve your problems faster. So now when something goes wrong with the flow, I get an email that tells me exactly what I need to know to pinpoint the place where the error happened. I can go right to my flow builder, figure out what's going on. It saves me a bunch of time. And with my naming convention, it allows me more flexibility in how to design my flows.
Great. That's a really great solution.
Thanks.
So thank you, Sarah, for that solution, for showing us how to customize flow error emails to help you troubleshoot and pinpoint the issue quickly when used in conjunction with the traditional longer flow error email. And showing us how to establish that naming convention for your flow elements and then customizing that error message to make it helpful for you.
Yeah.
So thanks for showing us that. And we look forward to having you back again in the future sometime.
Great. Anytime. I'd be glad to come back. Thanks.
You just saw how Sarah used the creative solution in Flow by establishing a naming convention for her flow elements, using assignment flow elements in a text template to send her a customized email that she can use in conjunction with the traditional flow email. #AwesomeAdmin. You can always find videos like this at admin.salesforce.com and also by subscribing to our YouTube channel, Salesforce Admins, so you will never miss another episode of How I Solved It. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome admin.